I said, my friends and family, they all know I'm wild and crazy. No one is going to believe I died by a firing squad.
What's up, you guys? Today's guest is Cookie Hood. Cookie was a war correspondent for CBS during the 1980s. She was one of the journalists who first broke the Iran-Contra scandal. She was also married to a drug trafficker from Nicaragua who was, get this, involved with Freeway Rick Ross and the CIA in the scandal that erupted around crack cocaine and South Central during the 1980s. This was an amazing episode. She talks all about her time married to a drug trafficker, how Pablo Escobar was at her wedding, all the way to the stories of her being a war correspondent during the 1980s, getting smeared by the CIA. Truly a historical figure. This is an amazing episode, you guys. Enjoy it. And of course, go check out our Patreon episode we did with her where she spills the secrets of the CIA and Freeway Rick Ross. Go over to patreon.com/The Connect Show. Enjoy this episode with Cookie Hood right here on The Connect.
I knew that it was going to be the biggest story of my life. What I didn't know is that I was a part of that story, personally, through the drugs.
That's when I see the lights behind me start to flash. And I didn't even think, I just hit it. I was driving like my life depended on it. And then I parked the car, hopped out, closed the door, and I started running.
And he pulls out a burner, a shank, it's like 6 inches. And then he passes it to me. And he goes, here, that's yours. Don't ever leave the cell block without this. He was the reason I made it out of that place alive.
Well, first of all, Journalista is amazing. Congratulations.
Glad you like it.
Yeah, I'm hooked on it. So
lots of fans. We have lots of phenomenal reviews.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I want to see this get made into a TV show.
That's the goal.
Yeah, the business. It's not the right time for the business right now.
Right.
Hollywood's on strike.
But people have time now to be reading what we're, pushing. And so things will happen when they're meant to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a complicated issue. Most people that aren't my age or older know about this. So I'm going to walk them through it a little bit.
Absolutely.
Nicaragua back in the 70s and 80s was all over the map. It was like a global news story,
we couldn't produce enough pieces and stories.
Yeah.
They wanted us on morning news, evening news, weekend news, Sunday morning, West 57, 60 Minutes. We couldn't produce enough stories. But at the end, we couldn't give the shit away for free.
Because you just used it up?
Well, no, because nobody cared anymore.
Yeah.
Once the wars had ended, once U.S. involvement was kind of out of the picture, nobody gave a anymore.
Well,
and you know that the public has got an attention span of a gnat.
Of course.
You know.
Especially now. I mean, forget about it. You barely hear about what's really going on in Russia and Ukraine.
Absolutely.
So, and you have these block of countries, El Salvador, obviously Nicaragua, but Honduras. A lot of the things that were going on in Nicaragua were happening all over Latin America.
Guatemala and Panama.
Guatemala and Panama. That's right.
Noriega.
So you are born in Nicaragua.
No, born in New Orleans.
Okay.
Raised in both countries.
Great. And your father and mother, tell us about your childhood.
Born in New Orleans, raised in both countries. Mother was from Nicaragua. Father was from New Orleans. Self-made man, airline business. That's how they met.
What did he do for the airline?
He ran TACA Airlines. TACA was the airline of El Salvador.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a plane you want to take.
And those, Take a Chance Airlines is what we used to call it.
Did they go down? Did those flights used to go down?
No, that was SASA.
Okay.
SASA was stay at home, stay alive. Yeah. So they met through the airlines because my mother was related to the owners of TACA. And they met that way.
Hey guys, football season is back, and if you like firing on action every Sunday, you've got to check out PrizePicks. I use PrizePicks because, for me, sports is more exciting when you got a little skin in the game. And it's an easy way to double, triple, sometimes 25x your money. This is how it works. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will beat the PrizePicks projections, you're not battling against thousands of different pros and sharks out there. All you need to decide is if your picks will beat or not beat the PrizePicks projections. It's a perfect way for the lay person and the amateur sports fan to get a little action and make a little bit of money off of sports. They have weekly promotions. They make it easy to deposit and withdraw. They have an Apple Pay function now. It's the best way to dip your toes into the world of daily fantasy sports. I can't recommend them enough. Go over to PrizePicks.com and use the promo code CONNECT, that's CONNECT, and get $100 matched on your first deposit. Again, that's PrizePicks.com, promo code CONNECT, and get a little skin in the game this football season. All right, let's get back into the episode.
So your mother was from one of the
wealthy families of Nicaragua.
And I'm trying to paint what that looks like for people. It's the oligarchy. Like people talk about, how the oligarchs are running America.
1% owns everything.
And I'm talking about everything.
Everything.
From the banks to the railroads, the airlines.
They not only own everything, but they don't get educated or medical attention in Nicaragua. They had the means to always get all of that taken care of elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we were all educated in the United States. Any health problems, any health you flew to the U.S.
Yeah. So there's this constant diaspora back and forth between the rich people of Latin America, Nicaragua specifically, and the United States.
Correct.
What was the source specifically of your mother's family's wealth?
They were involved in the airline business as well. Yeah. And it's a very incestuous country. Right. I tell people, Nicaragua. Everyone's related to everyone. Everyone's involved in everyone's business, not just personal business, but business. So, but
did they know the Somozas?
Of course,
obviously.
Well, I played with the kids,
right? And let's.
My mother was the consul of Nicaragua in New Orleans.
Yeah,
and she was best friends with Somoza's wife,
right.
Hope.
Let's tell us who Somoza is really quick. Let's do a background on him.
Well, there was 3 generations of them. First, you had Somoza Garcia, who came into power in the 30s, humble military man, but married into a wealthy Nicaraguan family. And that's what brought the family out of poverty and into power. Then when he was assassinated in 1957, his son, Tacho Somoza, and he was Somoza de Baile, he was raised and educated in the States. He went to West Point. So he took over. There were 2 brothers that ran the country, his brother and himself.
And the one who was overthrown is?
Tacho Somoza.
Right. So, and he was, from what I studied about him, like a real evil man, or what we would consider evil.
He was a good dictator. Well, he was good at being a dictator.
How so?
Well, he kept the revolutionaries at bay. He controlled everything, owned a lot of the country.
Yeah, when I heard that soundbite from
about
Journalista, they ask him, "What do you own?" And he's like 5 minutes he spends just listing everything that he owns. And it's like, you couldn't do that in America.
And there's another great little story in one of the episodes. He's out in the countryside driving with his bodyguards and his driver, and he sees this beautiful ranch and he says, "Wow, that's beautiful. Who owns it?" And the driver says, "You do, Mr. President. You own it."
Just wealth.
Like, okay.
Wealth that you forget about.
Yeah. And we grew up like that. Although when we would be in this country, we kind of did our chores at home, and my dad would make us get, little jobs. And
you had a little bit of responsibility.
Yeah. My dad taught us the work ethic.
Yeah.
And, it was 2 different complete lifestyles.
But when you're down there and you're wealthy, you don't have to raise a finger. You have drivers, maids, butlers, bodyguards.
But my dad's side kept us grounded.
Right.
At least kept me grounded.
Sure.
And my dad always said, treat the lady like a whore, the whore like a lady, and everything's going to be okay for you.
I love that Southern charm.
Yeah. And also my dad's theme was a lady's name should be in print 3 times in her life, when she's born, married, and when she dies.
Yeah.
He was horrified at my lifestyle.
Right. Sure.
Horrified.
Or had to have been.
Horrified.
Yeah. So what became of your mother's side of the family? What became of, after the revolution, what became of
I still have family down there.
And were they able to hold on to their wealth after the revolution?
In other words, I think they later became genteel poverty. They lost a lot of their money for, mismanagement, whatever reasons.
Yeah.
People lose their money. They didn't lose it through the revolution.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And then, but our father was a very wonderful provider. He took care of us. We had the best education, the best upbringing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of love. We were raised on survival, which served me well in my life.
Yeah, I'll say.
Served me very well. But
okay, so you're from this really, really small, tight-knit group of families that own all of the wealth of Nicaragua. The rest of the country is de facto starving.
Poor.
Yeah, we're real poor though.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so this is all of Latin America back in those days.
Correct.
And so
still is.
And still for the most part still is. And so this is a breeding ground for like revolutionary activity. You've got communism obviously taking root in Cuba, right? This is still the height of the Cold War. And America is just scared to death of the commies, right? So now we have you're a teenager when the revolution happens, correct?
I was a teenager when I became aware of underground revolutionary activities because a lot of my friends were involved.
The rich kids.
Underground.
Wow.
That's when things started to change in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear some anecdotes throughout in Journalista, but the rich kids started becoming enamored of not just a revolution, but of helping others.
Yeah.
They could see they had everything. Like I came to an epiphany at some point, also in the show.
They were like the original like woke kids of America.
Correct.
Rich families.
But in the
privileged.
underground, because they had several things in their favor. Education, money, and connections.
Yeah. Time. And that's what you need to start an armed rebellion.
Correct.
So did you know rich kids, like kids from your status that would take up arms?
I knew some because they made themselves transparent to me for one reason or another. Maybe somebody needed me to hide them, in my house, midnight knocks on the door. Also because some of them were being killed by the Somoza guardsmen.
Wow.
And their names, you knew them.
Well, how were they not able to get out of being killed if they were rich kids?
Because they were in the trenches with the...
Doesn't matter at that point. You get caught fighting on the wrong side.
Oh, yeah.
Who the Sandinistas, who are still in power to this day, were the ones who eventually overthrew Somoza, the dictatorship of... They
never thought they were going to win.
Oh, well...
They thought they were fighting a losing battle, but they were going to put in the good fight.
Yeah.
Never dreaming they were going to win. But then Bill Stewart gets killed, an ABC News journalist.
Right. Crazy.
50,000 Nicaraguans can be killed, but that's okay.
You don't...
One U.S. journalist... did it.
You don't touch a gringo. When I heard that on the podcast, I went and Googled, you can YouTube
Oh, he's
that
got
killing.
A monument there.
Yeah. Oh,
There's
wow.
There's a monument in the neighborhood where he was shot.
Yeah. You just see one.
The video is horrifying.
It's grainy, but you can see where clearly that he's got his hands on his head and the soldier just leans over and shoots him.
That turned it.
That's what put international
and that's
press.
When Somoza, it wasn't enough. We still wanted to support Somoza, but we just couldn't anymore. And it was a horrible time to be trying to overthrow this dictatorship. If you didn't get killed along the way, they didn't dream they were going to win, and yet they won.
Yeah.
And when they marched into the city, the 9 comandantes that eventually took over, they marched into the Intercontinental Hotel lobby and they said, wait, we won. Now what do we do? Okay, well, you Why don't you be in charge of defense? Why don't you be in charge of education? This is how they did it.
It's wild. They're just like, oh, I guess we'll
and
start a
half of
government.
them were rich kids.
Wow. But I guess
Was it just poor?
because if it was just poor people, they
wasn't just poor
don't have any
revolutionaries.
education.
It was also some rich kids that I grew up with.
Right. Wow. So you actually knew a couple of the people.
Absolutely.
in a high
I also
level.
knew the Contra hierarchy. Wow. The hierarchy that was running the Contras.
Right.
I also grew up with. They were also half of them rich kids.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so that's what made things so easy for me to slip in and do what I did because I knew all the players.
Yeah. Wow. So what? Okay.
I know, it blows your mind,
what
right?
happened to the Contras that survived? The Contra rebels.
Wait,
right
are you
after
talking about the Somoza Guardsmen? Because there was two wars.
Oh, of course. We don't even have the Contras
so
yet.
You see,
so I'm so
first
sorry.
you got two wars. First, you got the Somoza Guardsmen that are overthrown. Somoza's overthrown. Sandinistas win.
So let's just stop.
That was a revolution.
Let's stop at the revolution for a second.
That's
I don't want to get ahead
revolution.
of us. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Where were you when the revolution happened?
I was there.
And how long were they fighting before
this had been going
Somoza
on
finally
for,
fled?
I mean, this had been going on for years.
Right.
And then there was a funny, not funny way that you would be deemed a revolutionary and shot when they would stop young boys or young men from a certain age group to another, let's say from 13 to 30, they would make you roll up your sleeves and roll up your pants. And if your elbows and your knees had scrapes or scabs, that meant that you had been on the ground fighting, you were shot on the spot. So sometimes you were shot on the spot. Sometimes you were taken to the edge of town, everybody lined up, like those things where you saw the Nazis where they just shoot them. And then Somoza had also some very interesting ways to kill people. He would put them in their helicopters and throw them out of the helicopters into the volcanoes.
Which we know is a playbook of the CIA. In Vietnam, they used to do that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves either. So brutal repression.
War is
and they didn't have any help. The Sandinistas, they got help later, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the Cubans were helping them yet. They were on their own.
Well, there was help, but not like a lot. Like there were groups of underground Sandinistas in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, in Cuba. There's that funny scene in Woody Allen's Bananas where the Marines are flying into a banana republic. And one soldier asks the other, whose side are we fighting on in this conflict? And he says, look, our government's not taking any chances this time. Half of us are fighting with the revolutionaries. The other half we're fighting with the government. And that's, it was a third world banana republic revolution.
Do you think that the rich kids that were fighting for the Sandinistas were using any of their family money to help fund it? That makes sense. That makes sense.
That's why they were successful and they were needed. They were educated, they had money, and they had connections. So it would be less likely that you would be caught because you could be hidden by your family. You could be shipped out of the country, So
where did your family stand? For Somoza,
well, my mother,
obviously,
we grew up and were friends with the Somoza family and, cohorts and generals and stuff like that. But I do know that there was a time, and this is before the revolution happened, my mother, I would be sent on vacation every summer, Christmas and Easter, and my mother would give me envelopes. And she'd say, give this to your Aunt Violetta, which is Violetta, who was married to the newspaper man, Chamorro, that was assassinated. And then I'd also be bringing envelopes back to my mom. And I never really knew what was in those envelopes, but I can only imagine that my mom was helping in some sort of way.
Wow.
But she never told me. I was a teenager.
Right.
But it had to be something.
Yeah.
Papers that were being leaked out, leaked in.
So the rich families must have felt
some of them felt pressure. Pressure, some of them felt pressure to not do anything
Sure.
because they would lose everything.
Right.
Some of them felt pressure because some of these parents had to know that their kids were up to no good or up to good trouble.
But, if your family that's rich and they have everything to gain from Somoza staying in power, business as usual, if they're helping the rebels, the Sandinistas, clearly it's out of some sense of patriotism or moral duty. Like Somoza's gone too far. He's evil.
Kid
yeah.
that was already involved.
Yeah.
Or because they actually had morals and an ethical sense of, man, maybe we are kind of on the wrong side of this.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be a little more equal.
Right.
You
Or maybe if we can get him out of power, we can save some of our businesses too. Right?
There were those that did that. But what happened is a lot of his cohorts and a lot of family friends of mine, when he fell, they left. They were. They
just left their businesses, their properties.
This is a funny thing. So when they lose, a lot of these rich people, and some of them my relatives and friends, they thought that they were immediately going to be confiscated and shot and killed.
Yeah.
But what the Sandinistas did early on was they said, you know what? We're not going to be like Somoza was.
Yeah.
We're not going to kill all these guardsmen.
Yeah.
We're going to let them turn themselves in. We're going to give them, blanket pardons. We're going to do things differently.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. But what happened is a lot of these rich people were scared, especially those that were involved with the guardsmen. Which
is understandable. If you look at every past violent revolution, the first people to get popped are the elites.
They found out later they didn't have to leave. And by leaving, they lost everything.
Left their businesses.
And so, of course, then they abandoned the business.
Yeah.
And then they realized a few years later, they really didn't have to leave.
That's so
they could have stayed
and
still kept everything as long as they towed the line.
Yeah. And think about like what we're fed by the propaganda from the media in the US about communist revolutions, so-called communist revolutions. The rich are going to lose everything. The government's going to confiscate your business. And, it's all just fear mongering.
Well, the difference between you, myself, and a lot of people is that the majority of Americans are stupid.
Of course.
And so they don't even know the difference between communism and socialism. They put it all in the same sentence, and it's not.
That's right. But
it's different. They're complete different things. And I'm not saying I'm for one or the other, or I'm against both. Communism, that's just not me.
Yeah.
Socialism in Latin America was more about making things more equitable for the people, healthcare, education, just basic human needs.
It's essentially what Bernie Sanders wanted, but they took it at the barrel of a gun, because what other choice do you have? I mean, these people are living on the brink of extinction for generations since the Spanish conquered them.
The education system, 90% plus were illiterate.
Yeah.
Infants' mortality was just off the charts. People died of the most ridiculous things. And of course, the rich people, we could fly out of the country, go get medical care, in the U.S., get educated in the U.S. So all people wanted, and this wasn't even a difficult thing for some of the rich families to realize, that it's not really asking for a lot, just that you want your baby to survive and you want your kid to maybe have a chance in life. And you got to understand there had never been a middle class.
No.
But a middle class started to arise.
Wow.
Slowly,
Under the Sandinistas.
Under the Sandinistas. And at the beginning, the Sandinistas were aligned with the U.S.
Yeah. Okay.
It was only when they started doing these socialist programs of education and healthcare, which are okay, that the U.S. started getting nervous.
Well, it was also Reagan, though, too.
Let's
be honest. It was Reagan
and our
getting
government
elected.
got nervous.
Yeah.
And so they said, you know what? let's fix this problem, but let's create a bigger problem, which they always do. And so they started to cut off aid. We were aiding the Sandinistas. We were giving them money.
Is that true?
It is true.
So America
just
was
like
aiding
Castro,
the Sandinistas.
When Castro won,
wow.
we were aligned with Castro.
What year did the U.S. turn on Somoza? Like 74, 75?
No, the U.S. turned on Somoza when Bill Stewart got killed.
Right, which was
79.
what year? Okay, I got it. But how were they? What years were they funding the Sandinistas? I'm confused.
When the revolution wins and Somoza's out,
got it.
We figure, well, we got to be with these guys because they're now running this country.
Well, that's a pretty short period of time. That's only about a year before Reagan comes in. Okay,
very short.
So for the most part, the U.S.
they had that 1 year to start helping poor people.
Right.
And a lot of people here, they don't like that. We don't want education.
Yeah.
We don't want health care for all.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Reagan comes in.
Yeah, also, it's just the war machine. It's the way the hawks are pushing the neocons in our government today.
Absolutely.
Want more war with Ukraine.
War is good for business.
It's good for business. So that the same was happening. That was the story of the Cold War. So, but before we go into the 80s, we're flashback to the 70s. You are, a young lady in Nicaragua going back and forth between Managua and New Orleans. Why did you not want to get involved? Why did you not want to be a Sandinista?
Well, I was never really broached. You talking about before the revolution?
Yeah.
I was never really broached. My deal was just partying.
You were just a party girl.
I was a party girl, and obviously in New Orleans, but there was no partying in Nicaragua till the earthquake hit in 72. When the earthquake hits in 72, all hell breaks loose. And the teenagers, we all started smoking weed. Yeah. We all started. And so we started partying late in the game.
Right.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it wasn't a question of why didn't I want to be a Sandinista. I didn't know it was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was this underground revolutionary thing. And if I did learn of it here and there, it was by chance or because somebody needed my help.
Well, you almost got killed over it, though.
Correct. And also, I'm a person that I'm never adverse in helping underdogs. I always like underdogs. Whether it's in a football game or, a revolution, or I always like the underdog. And that's my American side, my dad's side. Yeah. Treat the lady like a whore and the whore like a lady, and I was never adverse to doing that. But maybe the question should be, would I have gotten involved if I had been approached? But I think the problem with that would have been I was too out there. I was like a neon sign. Maybe it's better someone more low key, someone more that could fade into the background.
You were too much of a party girl. You were too popular.
I was always out there.
Yeah.
Which later in life helped keep me alive.
Sure.
But I was always loud and just out there. And everybody wanted to, hang with Cookie and, and in all parts of my life, I was the person to be around with. You were guaranteed a party.
Yeah. You just wanted a good time. You're a rich girl. Why shouldn't you have it?
And educated and
well-traveled, world-traveled.
Yeah, spoke several languages, and it's just, and somehow or another, I always wound up with the bad kids, the bad.
So let's get into that.
Yeah.
Let's get into that. Who were your husband, your first husband?
My son's father.
Yeah.
Well, no, he wasn't my first husband, but we grew up together.
That guy wasn't your first husband?
No.
When did you get married?
What
year? What age were you first married?
I really don't know too much years and times, but I guess he was my first real husband.
Okay, sure.
Because I think I married his brother, for a green card.
Talking about Chino.
Chino's brother, to get him a green card, but we never did.
Okay.
So I was always doing these crazy things, let's skydive and let's marry somebody to get him a green card. I was down for anything. And Chino and I grew up together, but I was always hung out with guys, older guys. I was that kind of young kid that was sort of like buzzing around with the older kids, like, they swat you away, but they like having you. You're a mascot. And so I was always hanging around with the bad kids.
Yeah.
And so my son's father, I grew up with him.
In Managua.
Gotcha. And his best friend was Norbing.
Yeah. Who? Norwin Meneses.
And Norbing just loved me because I was this, cute little, American kid that he loved having around. And I like to say that they trained me. These guys all trained me.
Trained you to what?
To be cool, to be quiet. You don't talk about shit. You can party.
Did they first introduce you to cocaine?
No, I don't think so. I think I picked that up at Loyola. Of course, good Catholic school.
Sure. But, was there, and this is a good question.
But no, you're right. I did pick it up in the summer vacations in Nicaragua.
What years did you first notice cocaine start to pop up in Nicaragua?
Well, I had to be right out of high school. So 72, 73.
Okay.
And I'm going to start college.
Because Nicaragua was one of the main stops for Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel on their way to the U.S.
Unbeknownst to me, Norbing was already in business. He had a car ring. And
a stolen car ring.
Yeah, well, they had cars and they would send the cocaine out in the cars.
Right.
So instead of getting the cars in the U.S. and bringing them in to sell, they were doing it the opposite way.
Right. So they were stuffing the cars with coke, shipping them off to the U.S.
I found that out years later.
Right.
I wasn't privy to that fact at the time.
And was Norwin was he a rich kid?
Norwin came from a very well-educated, well-funded family. Right. Some military background there. And what
about Blandon?
Danilo came.
Blandon. Was he? Did he grow up with Norwin?
No, they didn't grow up together.
But the same era,
the same era. Yeah. I think Danilo was younger than Norbing. Norbing was the older guy. He's now 80, but he was the older guy. And I'm going to have to emphasize, these guys took me under their wing, and let's train the little girl.
Yeah.
Let's make her smart.
Yeah.
She's not just book smart. She's obviously got street smarts. Let's make sure she's got the right street smarts. And I'm not saying anything sexual or anything like that. I was always treated with kid gloves.
Yeah.
They were all my big brothers. Don't fuck with.
Plus, you're with Chino.
Well, no, Chino and I were still just
You
friends.
guys didn't get together until later.
Yeah, we were just. But of course, he loved me. He had a crush on me forever. And our families were intertwined.
Yeah.
And in fact, his mother would try to keep all his bad friends out of coming in the house. But Cookie would show up and she'd show me right in. And I was the worst one. I was the one you shouldn't be letting in.
Why?
Because I was like, I looked like a good girl and I checked off all the boxes, but I was an OG.
Yeah.
One of the original ones. And, I always had that in my favor, that I could use my what now you would call book smarts, street smarts, white privilege, education privilege, money privilege.
Americanism.
I had all of that going in my favor, and I knew how to use all that to get away with everything. Because look, this was one thing they taught me. If you're doing something illegal, do everything else by the book. Because you don't want to get stopped for a broken taillight. So have everythting be on the up and up so you can get away with everything.
Right.
Anything that you want.
Right. Now, in 1973, let's say, if a kid who's from a family of oligarchs connected to the Somozas, and he's starting to now get involved in drug trafficking, are there any real consequences if he gets caught?
Well, there were never any consequences for crimes if you came from the right families.
Right.
I don't know if you're aware of New Orleans and Louisiana politics. It's really corrupt.
Sure.
Well, because that state, my state, is a different form of government from the rest of the country.
Why? Because of the Louisiana Purchase and all the old
it's
French
the Napoleonic Code.
Yeah.
Which is the same laws as Latin America. And the rest of the country is...
Hence corruption.
Hence corruption.
Yeah.
Hence, it's who you know.
Yeah.
It's what you got.
Yeah.
So we knew we would never have to pay consequences for anything. We could get away, be bad kids, until that fateful night when we were all arrested.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us about that?
Well, it was Christmas time, and a few friends of myself and cousins, we went off to the mountains.
You're in Managua.
Managua, we
Yeah.
go off to the mountains to spend, some road trip. And then we did not know that one of our friends brought back a pound of weed because it was going to be for New Year's Eve. And I believe it wasn't that New Year's Eve, but one New Year's Eve, Mick came to town, Bianca was there, but I don't think it was that.
Mick Jagger?
Yeah, he would come because he was married to Bianca at the time. And so that night, we're coming in from the mountains I'm going to be dropped off in my neighborhood, rich neighborhood. And as we're coming in, 2 taxis are coming in the opposite direction. They stop in front of this house. The doors fly open. Hooded, armed, automatic weapons, guys come out, shoot everyone outside of the house, which were bodyguards and drivers.
Right.
And we're all like, what the fuck was that?
And
we stopped the car.
And so you just saw people get sprayed, mowed over.
Yeah.
What was that like? Like you talk about it, you're
Look,
like,
my whole
dead
life's
bodies.
been like the movies. And a lot of these stories you're going to hear, my reaction was, what would they do in the movie?
Yeah.
So that's the way it's always kind of been.
Yeah, you were
for
never
me.
a prissy, sensitive girl.
Oh,
like
no.
you never see people get shot to death and
Well,
scream and start
I was like
crying.
a guy. I've always been like a guy.
Yeah.
I used to say I had bigger balls than most guys that I knew. And so we're just like kind of shocked. And I mean, we were all kind of used to certain things like that because when you live in that kind of environment and government, even though the violence isn't directed to you,
Death's pretty
you know about
common.
it.
Yeah.
You know about it. And so we see this happening. We stop the vehicle. I think we moved a little further up and we're like, what the fuck was that? And everybody's got their opinion, what it is. We didn't know that it was a party going on in that house where I had relatives there, I had neighbors there, and the U.S. ambassador was there.
Was Somoza himself there?
No. But Somoza aligned people were there, friends, let's say. And Somoza was a good dictator, but he had one main flaw. And his flaw was family and friends. A good dictator doesn't give a fuck about anybody.
Sure.
To get what they want. Somoza had that. That was his Achilles heel.
Sure.
He had a soft spot for his friends and for his family. So before the takeover of that party, the U.S. ambassador left because that was never the intention to get involved with the U.S. ambassador because then you're creating a whole...
If they had killed or kidnapped that guy,
or even if he'd just been at the party,
yeah, would have been a whole different
left,
story.
And that was pre-planned.
Yeah.
The object of the raid was to hold the rich people hostage, get money, and get political prisoners, obviously Sandinistas, out of prison. That was the intent of the raid.
Which back then was very feasible.
It was feasible, but we'd never seen shit like that before. You know, there were skirmishes in the jungles. There were, things in the mountains, but not in the city. You know,
Right.
It would be like, well, you could see that happening here outside here, but it was new to us.
Yeah.
And so we took the vehicle around the block and then we parked it to where we could see what was going on, because by that time you could see the Somoza guardsmen had been sent in. They had surrounded the house because they didn't even know what was going on. You know, Somoza, nobody knew what was going on. Only the people in the house. And by that, I mean the armed people, not the guests. So we're looking, we're like, man, we're enthralled with this. What a great, vacation here. We're getting, bird's eye view.
Yeah. Dead bodies littered on the front lawn.
Yeah. And my cousin says to one of the guardsmen, look, we live right around the corner. Is it okay if we just, we've seen enough. We've been out here for a few hours.
Yeah.
Can we just move the car back to our house?
And right now there's a hostage situation
There's a hostage
going on inside the house.
There's a hostage situation inside.
Yeah.
And then there's the guardsmen surrounding the place because,
Yeah. Awaiting
and they
their
know
next move.
something happened.
Yeah.
So.
And those Sandinistas, ostensibly, those hooded Sandinistas in the house, some of those could be rich kids who know the people in the party.
It's not could be. You'll hear in my story, they were. So my cousin says, can we move the car to my house right around the corner? The Somoza guardsman says yes, but we got to search the car.
So what's a pound of weed, though, to some rich kids? Who cares?
Well, this is the catch. When they find, I don't know the pound of weed's in there.
Yeah.
And half of us most of us in the car, we didn't know that was in there. The weed was going to be a surprise gift for New Year's Eve. So when they find the weed, they think we are a distraction. We were put and sent there to distract the guardsmen from what's going on in the house, and let's bust these people with the weed.
They think you're in on it. They think you're in on the raid.
We don't know. Not only we're not in on it, we don't know what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, and that's the dumbest fucking theory, by the way. But anyways,
right?
Doesn't make any sense. But those are Latin American cops.
So
for
within seconds, 3 of their vehicles screeched to a halt by us. We're thrown in one of them. We're going to be taken to the prison that we've only heard of our whole life.
And this is the jail where people go in and come out dead, right? Yeah.
And it's what poor people, obviously a poor people's jail. I mean, we knew where it was. We've heard of it, but we've never set foot in it. And we were never going to set foot in it except for that fateful night when everything changed. The world changed. And the reason the world changed was at any other time, our names and our connections would have been enough to not let this go any further.
Totally.
But because there was this hostage situation going on, Sandinistas, revolutionaries are involved, we're considered that we're probably part of the underground. And the world changed for us at that moment. There was no one that was going to get us out because Somoza says to everyone, no one can make any decisions about anything except myself. So no generals, no lieutenants, no colonels can say, well, she's so-and-so, we could let her go home. And what the fuck does he care about 4 rich kids that are probably safer in the prison? And he's probably not even sure if we were involved. And he doesn't have time to deal with that.
But that probably kept you guys alive, because if he had, given power over to the underlings, they probably would have said, just shoot him to death. We don't want to take a chance. We almost
got shot to death.
So tell us about the firing squad.
So we're held that night. We're brought in front of Commandant. We're separated. So the guys go one way. I'm by myself. This place is notorious for, and I just said to myself, well, My game plan here is I am just going to act completely insane. I am just going to start screaming, ranting, and raving, and it worked. They kind of kept their distance. This bitch is crazy.
You mean from the other prisoners?
Soldiers. No, from the soldiers. They took me aside. They put me in an office. They wanted to throw me in with the prostitutes and everybody, which I wouldn't have had a problem with. I'd have been friends, within minutes with these ladies. But they put me in an office. My concern was being by the guardsmen, by the cops. And you have to understand, we were never, ever meant to be in a place like this. Not that we didn't deserve to be every now and then.
But weren't one of you guys screaming, do you know who my family is? Like, I would have been like, oh, just give me a phone call. We'll fix this misunderstanding.
That.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where then I was brought in front of the comandante of the prison, and he gets it in his head that I'm Patricia Hearst. She's missing. Patricia, Patty Hearst, was the daughter of the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, and she had been kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, and that whole Stockholm syndrome had gone into effect. She, was with them when they robbed a bank, and she was still out there. So this Comandante thinks he's got Patty Hearst here. He thinks he's got some kind of international, I guess she was called a terrorist at some point. And my friends had said, look, don't speak Spanish, just speak English, because maybe you can get out by saying, you're an American citizen, call the embassy.
Right.
So up until that point, I wasn't speaking Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So I hear the Comandante say, this is Patty Hearst. And I just look at him and the Spanish just comes out.
Yeah.
My foul language saying, I'm not fucking Patty Hearst. And then one soldier says to the Comandante, this bitch speaks Spanish better than we do. And she's speaking street Spanish, And he goes, oh, so you speak Spanish now? And I'm like, yeah, and what? I'm not Patricia Hearst. I am from New Orleans. I go to Loyola. This is crazy. We're not involved in anything. We'd been interrogated the night before, but they're trying to interrogate us about stuff that we didn't know about. And we really didn't know about it. So I guess my not having prior knowledge helped me there too.
Of course.
Because I could have been tortured.
Yeah.
And so the next thing we find out, we did not know, but our relatives were already getting us out.
They were already making phone calls. And
phone calls had already been made. They're already getting us out. But again, they're trying to reach Somoza, say, let these kids out.
And there's no communication. You guys haven't called them, nothing.
Well, there's nothing.
Lost.
We're in a third world country, jail, prison.
So then it was like, I guess they decided they knew we were who we said we were. They knew we were going to get out, but they said, let's fuck with these kids, Let's make them suffer a little bit. And so they brought us all together, and it's daylight by then. The sun had come up. And I think it took our relatives hours, I don't know how many hours of that day to get us out. And then they put us against this wall. And like the wall, like in the prison, in the prison yard?
Outside.
Okay.
In
the yard.
In the yard. And they put us against the wall, and we're still talking to each other. We're glad, we're alive, How was your night? And I said, dude, they think that I'm, Patty Hearst, and how crazy is that? And then the next thing you know, you see these 6 soldiers just kind of line up with their weapons. And I'm kind of looking at it sideways, and a moment where I decide to act like what would you do in the movies? And in the movies, they say you look them in the eye, you get them to know you, and so they'll have difficulty pulling the trigger.
Right, humanize yourself,
And that's what I did. And I'm, screaming, arguing. I'm like, look, guys.
That's when, if I was a chick, that's when the titties got to come out.
Can't do that because then you're looking to get.
I'll take that over a bullet.
Nah, That never occurred to me.
No,
And being from New Orleans,
okay.
it could have, right?
Right,
Because of Mardi Gras.
right.
But I never had
I
big
don't hold it against
No,
you.
but I never had big titties, so it wouldn't have mattered. But, and I'm looking at it sideways. I said to my friends, I said, this doesn't look right here.
Mm-mm.
And then I'm talking to the soldiers. Look, you guys got it all wrong. I'm not Patty Hearst. I'm not this international wanted terrorist. I go to Loyola. I'm a freshman, And
So
then
you're 18 years old when this is going on.
Yeah, and I remember saying, guys, I'm talking to the soldiers, and I'm talking the street Spanish, and I said, my friends and family, they all know I'm wild and crazy. No one is going to believe I died by a firing squad.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And I'm thinking it's these movies where the innocent man plays the whole movie trying to prove his innocence where everything looks like he's guilty.
It's a nightmare.
And then, of course, they got us out.
Hold on. Don't skip over the climax.
Okay.
They fired at you.
No. They
didn't shoot
never
above your
fired.
heads.
No,
I
they never
misheard that.
fired. No, they never fired.
Wow.
They just made us think they were going to fire.
So can you imagine if they had actually shot you? You would have been the Bill, what was his name? The guy
Bill
who got
Stewart.
killed? You would have been the Bill Stewart.
Well,
If
no,
they had
because I
killed-
wasn't a journalist yet.
Yeah, but if they had killed
I see what you're
an
saying.
18-year-old
Yeah,
American,
the impetus to cause.
they would have probably sent in American troops to
you're
topple
right.
Somoza.
I never thought of that.
They would have toppled him way 6
Yeah,
years
I
earlier.
never thought of that.
Wow.
But
Wow.
then also, they could have shot me and I would have never been found
Or
again.
they would have disappeared you, which is
Yeah.
they probably did a lot of that too, right? Disappearing people.
And usually the disappeared were poor, humble
Yeah.
people, so
Yeah.
peasants.
So after this happens,
But what happens, and I got to tell you this, when we finally get out, we're loaded back into a car with one of my uncles.
Mhm.
He's driving us back to the neighborhood where the hostage situation had taken place the night before.
did they let you keep your weed?
Oh, never saw that again. And as we're driving in, there's a bus coming in a different direction. And I'm looking at it. I didn't know at the time it was the Sandinista political prisoners that had been let out of prison. It was the Archbishop who had been requested to be the intermediary. The $1 million, I think they had asked originally for $4 million. They got $1 million in cash.
Wow.
And so that bus is coming out. And I remember looking at some of the faces, and one of them, I never forgot his face. And it turned out years later, that was Daniel Ortega.
Wow. He was on the bus. He was one of the prisoners.
He was on the bus, and he's looking at
Wow.
me, and I'm looking at him. And little did we know, our lives intersected at that moment. We had no idea how our lives were going to intersect yet again
Great.
in the next decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay. So after you escaped death at the jail in Managua, do you go back to the U.S.? When
I go back to the U.S. because my family was horrified that I
Yeah.
had been put in that position.
Yeah.
So they said, well, we sent her to Nicaragua so she'd stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
Because, the U.S., the drugs are big here. So let's bring her back to the U.S., okay? They
when's the next time you returned to
Well, I would
Managua
always
after
go
that?
back.
Okay.
In other words, I was always there at least 6 months out of the year
Wow.
for summer, Christmas,
Yeah.
Easter vacations.
Mhm.
And so after that happens in 74, I go back to New Orleans. I go back to Loyola. And
Do you finish out there?
I didn't finish yet because then I come back to Nicaragua on a trip and I run into his dad,
Who is?
Chino.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time now, Chino is now not just a local
Small-time
guy.
punk.
Well, he was never a punk, but it wasn't just a local enterprise. But I didn't know this, and it had now become an international
He's a trafficker.
and enterprise.
And he's working with
Oh, he's
Danilo.
with,
and
Danilo's
Norwin?
not in the picture yet.
Is he working with Norwin?
Nordwing was
Norwin?
always there. Nordwing has always been my friend, my mentor in a lot of things. I know it sounds crazy, because I didn't look at these guys as criminals, and they were my friends who happened to be on the wrong side of the law. But if you looked at me, I was also always on the wrong side of the law.
Now, what's interesting about this is that unlike most countries where drug trafficking was taking root back then, Colombia, Mexico, the drug traffickers from Nicaragua aren't these kids from the slums, from the barrios. They're from the oligarch families. Because
of the connections.
Right.
Because of the money.
Yeah.
And because we always knew that
there's
not going to be consequences.
No. Right.
If you can't pay yourself out of it, handle things in other ways that we're not going to discuss, or just pull the do you know who I am card.
Now, do you know when you first hooked back up with Chino in the mid-'70s, was the military involved in the drug trafficking?
Well, they had to be, but I didn't know. I mean, I wasn't privy to the day-to-day operations.
I guess what I'm saying, just from a historical perspective, do we know now?
Well, they always were.
Yeah. Did Somoza have anything to do with it?
I mean, I guess he did. I mean, he had his hands in every cookie jar, so why not?
Right.
And then the Sandinistas did, and it's, drugs were good for business too.
Why was Nicaragua, of all places in Central America, why was that the stopover point for the Colombians?
It was a port on either side. You had the Pacific on one side, you had the Atlantic on the other side. Nicaragua was the largest country land-wise, but with the smallest population in Central America. So it was a lot easier to control things. And again, the well-known people were running things. They ran the ships, the shipyards, the port, the sugar industry, just everything.
Yeah.
So if you didn't smuggle things in one way, you smuggled things another way. I didn't care how the shit was coming or going, just give me my shit, give me my blow.
You were just a rampant drug addict.
I didn't start off that way.
No, of course not. But you loved coke. You loved doing it.
I loved everything. I loved weed. I loved coke. I was never in the opioid shit or, heroin, none of that. It was like a normal teenage journey. Weed, psychedelics, coke.
100% Colombian blow.
Yeah. And some of the best shit, it was just too much.
And that's so good. I mean, my producer
Pink
and
Peruvian flakes. I don't know if you've ever seen those or tried them, but.
And it was so pure. You could just stay up doing it. Like it was like drinking coffee for weeks at a time.
I didn't go to bed till everything was gone.
How much could you sniff at one time?
I mean, I would stay up for days. I mean, in other words, what I had, I would not go to bed until I finished what I had. So I could be up for a day, 2, 3, a week.
So in a week, could you go through 4 ounces?
I mean, I wasn't counting. I mean, there was never any.
There was never any shortage.
Yeah, it was always there. And I was always been given the shit.
Right.
Oh, here's some for Cookie. Give Cookie, let's keep Cookie happy. And, they're doing it too. They're also partying. So, and she's pretty and we like having her here. She's smart. She puts in her 2 cents.
Yes. So because I don't think you give yourself enough credit about how shrewd you were, even on the business side, because you ended up in a room with the top guys in the States.
Always.
And Pablo. Pablo was in that room.
Always, I was in the room with the top guys.
Tell this story, please.
Well, there's many of those stories,
Right.
and it involved the same people.
So tell us how you made it to the States after you came back.
Well, I hooked up back with Chino,
Yeah.
and then we get together. And
are you in love?
I mean, I don't think I've ever really been in love. I mean, I just wasn't that kind of girl. I was like a guy, slam bam, thank you, man, kind of thing. I just never. That was just never me.
You like to hit it and quit it.
Yeah, this just was never me, and I never committed. I always left everybody.
But what was it about Chino that you said,
he was
you know
just
what?
a nice guy,
I'm going to end up marrying this guy.
we're living in Miami. Well, no, we're forgetting a big part. I went back to New Orleans and I'm working with my girlfriend who's a dress designer, and I start modeling. And I had been modeling in New Orleans as a teenager and working in fashion. And around this time, Yvonne LaFleur was her name. She decides she wants to go to New York, open up a showroom with her designs. And what better way to sell her Southern designs than have a Southern model running the showroom? And then, I don't know if you know the fashion business in New York, the Garment Center, you know, the buyers come in, they're looking at dresses and clothes off the rack. I want this, I want that. Well, we weren't going to do that. And we're on 7th Avenue and in the Garment Center. Our game plan was I was going to model every outfit to the buyers. And the buyers are like, wait, you think I'm going to sit here and wait for you to change into, you know, this whole line of clothing? And I'm like, just give me 5 minutes. And it worked.
Wow.
And so I was very successful selling, you know, running the showroom and modeling on the side. And so this is before I get back with Chino. This is after the, you know, the whole firing squad thing. And I go back to Loyola, I get back to modeling, and I'm in New York and I'm living the high life, Studio 54. And
wow,
I got all the dresses, I got the clothes.
Are you rubbing shoulders with celebrities?
Oh, absolutely. Because remember, Studio 54, Steve Rebell, he, for the first time, a club, you were let in by the way you looked. So Steve would come outside and he'd look around. And if you were pretty, the pretty people, the beautiful people brought in the rich people, brought in the famous people. And so here's a cute little, you know, 19-year-old model, Southern Belle from New Orleans. She looks fabulous. She's a party girl. You know, by the second night, he knows my name. Cookie, come on in.
Yeah.
And so I would go in. And that's when I had reconnected with Bianca. She was hanging out. And
And Bianca was married to Mick Jagger
at the time. And of course, you know, it didn't take long for me to be invited into the basement, you know, where the real party was going on.
Okay, so what does partying with Mick Jagger look like back in the 70s?
Well, it was mostly with Bianca because he wasn't living in New York at the time, and I was just partying with the glitterati, the jet set, you know, Calvin Klein, and you know, this dress designers and rock stars, and I would always be friends with Bianca. We're still friends, and then there was an earthquake in Nicaragua in '72. And so, of course, I was there when that happened. Bianca comes in, the Stones come and do a benefit concert.
Wow.
And so Mick would stay, and I remember spending a couple of New Year's Eves with him and Bianca in Nicaragua. And so
you got this completely double life.
I got the double life, and I'm living the same lifestyle everywhere I go.
You're facing a firing squad in a Nicaraguan jail, and then you're at Studio 54 doing blow with celebrities.
And all with
living
cool,
the high life.
Calm.
Yeah.
You know, it was just another day.
What
of
did you
my life.
want to do? Did you think about the future, or were you just having fun?
And first of all, I never thought I was going to get old. You know, money was always just abundant. Party favors were just abundant.
Yeah.
And so I did the whole modeling thing. And then New York just got too cold weather-wise for me. And so I took a vacation to Miami, and that's where I ran into Chino again.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's in love. I guess I thought I was falling in love, and I get pregnant. And I'm in Miami. I planned to have him in Miami, and then someone got in trouble, and we had to go, you know, sort of on the lam, and so we went to San Francisco.
So now at this time, Chino's a real player.
He's in deep.
He's a real
in the game.
player.
He's in deep.
And do you
and
know?
I know that.
Do you know who Pablo Escobar?
Look, I'm going to tell people like
was
that I have
at
to
the
say
time?
to this day. Pablo was just Pablo to me. I called him El Jefe, meaning the boss. Yeah, I knew his name was Pablo Escobar.
But was he famous when you met him?
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was. He had the big pink house in Miami Beach. But a lot of times they would come hang out at my house in Miami. And I always preferred to be in my house because, the paranoia was starting to set in and I felt more comfortable at my house. So that's when you referred to the round table of the partying where you're doing the Coke rap all night. We're going to solve all the world's problems. And Pablo was just there.
Yeah.
Like my son's father was there. Like I was there. Like players that were coming in and out all the time.
Was he a cokehead? Was Pablo a partier?
He partied.
Okay.
But he wasn't.
They portray him as a pot smoker.
And he liked to have cocktails.
Yeah.
But, I learned obviously in the game, don't do the drug that you're selling.
Yeah, but most people broke those rules.
They broke those rules, but Pablo was a good, he wasn't out there crazy like my son's father. He was just, he'd have a couple of drinks and then he'd just get stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there were many of those nights and we all were sitting around. And
Pablo liked you though.
He liked me because again, I was that girl that wasn't a girl.
Yeah.
And that they could trust. Like if they're talking about things.
I'm listening. What would they be talking about?
Business. Maybe I'm listening. Maybe I'm not.
Is there any conversation that really stuck out to you?
There was that one that's in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want me to talk about that conversation?
No, they can go listen to it.
Okay.
But basically, Pablo's giving you props like you're the one that should be running the show.
Well, there was an incident that could have turned into a disaster. I kind of helped put the brakes on it. You'll hear it in the podcast. And, Pablo liked that about me. Mm-hmm. But I guess the main thing is that I didn't act like a girl. I didn't, I wasn't out there.
Yeah.
Because women in drugs, they're either talking too much because they're too high, or they're showing off. My man is so and so, and I know, and I didn't do any of those things. I called myself Mrs. Scarface because I could control people with the blow.
Yeah,
you just you could make anybody do anything, dude.
Yeah.
It was
so you're
crazy.
like living like Evita. You're living like Michelle Pfeiffer.
I'm doing that. We had the big homes. We had the fast cars. We had the fast boats. We had the race horses. People in your house, 24/7. You don't know who the fuck they are.
Was your husband and the Nicaraguans, were they the distributors for Pablo Escobar? Was that why he was around? I assume that's why, because he was Norbing's right-hand guy. Right.
So, and they liked Chino because he was a nice guy in the wrong game. He was not an enforcer, but they knew he would never steal from them. Yeah. He knew that he would never lie to them. And he was protected, like I was protected.
Well, they must have been good business people because when they first show up on the government's radar, and this is when you guys are in San Francisco, the Nicaraguans really had hustle. They were always opening businesses, even if they were front businesses, starting restaurants. They were the ones that had the accounts.
And not just in Nicaragua.
No, of course not. I'm talking about stateside. I'm talking about
Miami, San Francisco.
Yeah, but they were not known as players in the drug game back then. It wasn't until, the scandal in the 90s came out that they were like, oh, wow, the Nicaraguans really had.
They were good businessmen
hustle.
A lot longer than most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Until they weren't.
Yeah. Well, they weren't violent. They were the Cubans, the Mexicans, the Colombians.
Some of them were violent, but we won't go into that.
I don't think they were known for being very violent in the States.
They were not.
They were just the business people.
They were not, yeah.
So what takes you guys out to San Francisco, to the West Coast?
While we were in Miami and I'm pregnant, we find out that somebody got popped and they were on to, some of the goings on. And so we just thought it was prudent to leave Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Miami became a real hotspot.
Miami got hot.
Miami got real hot. It was the time when the IRS got involved with the, you can't deposit, 10 grand or more. And by that time, we were showing up with duffel bags, to the banks.
Would you take duffel bags of cash to
we
the
were
banks?
taking, well, I wasn't doing it. But yeah, there was the duffel bag era.
Yeah.
And that was right before the IRS got involved. So it was duffel bags of money. And then, of course, and I have some great stories, I'd sleep all day. We'd wake up at night. I want to buy a car today. I'd go to a car dealership. I look like shit. I'd been up all night. And I'm dressed, real casual, but I got all my jewelry on.
Yeah.
And I'd walk into a dealership and, nobody's coming up to me. And after an hour, I go up to a guy. I said, is somebody going to fucking help me? Well, what do you want? He's just looking at me. I said, well, I want that car over there, BMW, Mercedes, whatever. And, he says, well, it costs, at the time, $26,000. That was a lot then.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and he goes, well, how are you going to pay for it? I said, does cash work for you? And so by that time, that guy to me was just an asshole.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I don't want you to help me. I want that guy to help me. And then that guy comes up and I'm counting out in hundreds, the 26 grand.
Yeah.
And then I walk by the first guy and I said, you should have noticed the fucking jewelry, dude.
Yeah.
The diamonds, the pearls. You should have noticed the jewelry, So
you just got millions of dollars going through.
I never knew what we had,
Yeah.
how much we had. I'd open a closet, kilos would fall out, and I would get so angry. That's what safe houses are for.
Yeah.
That's what we pay
Yeah.
other people to do.
Right.
We don't need to have this shit. And then the thought of getting popped for shit that I didn't even know was in my house just drove me fucking nuts.
Right.
And then I'm surrounded by all these Latinos that have no conception of the law in the U.S.
Of course not, because they come from a place where you can do
You can
anything.
buy yourself out, your connections, whatever.
Yeah. So,
or violence.
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm always having to say, I'm always having to be that voice of reason in the room,
La Rubia.
And and don't be in the same room with a lot of product, a lot of money, and a lot of heavy people.
Did you guys have guns lying around? Do you remember that?
There were guns, but that was the rule, my rule. Don't be in this house with a lot of product, a lot of money, and a lot of heavy hitters.
So when you guys fled to San Francisco, you would just leave the mansions, right? The cars, you just abandon it. Didn't matter.
Just leave.
Because there's always more money coming in.
And you just pick up, there.
How long did you live in San Francisco for?
I don't know. But I moved in with Nordabeam.
This is rock and fucking roll, dude.
And I lived with Nordabeam. We were living in Pacifica, which was outside of San Francisco. And then we were friends with another Nicaraguan that you'll know, Chipito Arias, the bongo player for Santana.
Oh, okay.
And so he was in the crew. And then, of course, I had him in San Francisco.
So you had him before you actually got married, right?
No.
Okay.
I got married at Nordabeam's house at the 8th month of pregnancy.
In Los Angeles?
No, in Pacifica.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Outside of San Francisco.
So, and tell us about your wedding.
Nordabeam gave me away. He walked me down the aisle. It's in his home.
You didn't tell your parents at all. Parents know nothing of what's going on.
Remember, my dad only wanted to know your name 3 times in life: when you're born, married, or dead.
Yeah.
And so, I just wasn't, telling my parents anything.
Tell us about the wedding.
The wedding was awesome, dude. So Pablo gives me a half a pound of Coke. My best friend who's in New Orleans, I fly her out. We spent 2 days just grinding up, the blow.
Yeah.
We had bought 1 gram bottles, but we knew quickly that wasn't going to be enough.
No.
So I said somebody to go buy 2 gram bottles. We filled those up, little bows, and I'm 8 months pregnant.
bows on the bottles of blow.
Yeah, it's a party favor,
Of
wedding
course.
favor. And I'm 8 months pregnant.
And that doesn't register at all when you're doing coke and partying?
Well, I wasn't doing a lot, but at the time, and I'm not proud of it, there wasn't a lot of medical data on, cocaine use. Alcohol and cigarettes were more dangerous to the fetus.
Were you smoking and drinking?
Not drinking, not smoking.
Your son seems very calm.
And he came out
For
okay.
being a coke baby. Yeah.
He wasn't a coke baby. And so we throw this lavish wedding. Judges and ministers did not come, priests did not come to homes in San Francisco. So we had to look for a denomination that would. We found the Libertarian Church, a guy named Mark DeWolf comes out. Chipito pulls out his Rolls Royce. He comes. We got the gardenias. We got Blow. Chino the whole night is in the basement doing free bass.
Yes.
With his guys.
So now he's already on Freebase.
He's moved on to that.
Which is a problem.
Well, yeah, it wasn't crack yet. It was, the rich man's crack. And so it comes time. The minister comes up to me and he's like, look, I got somewhere else to be. We got to do this wedding now. And I said, look, he says, I can't even find my Bible. I said, well, I think they're using your Bible in the next room, with lines on it. And he just looks at me. I said, now I can give you a little something that could perk you up if you want to stay a little. He goes, really? Sure, I'm down. So we get Mark the Wolf, the minister. He's now getting all fucked up. And we finally,
I love the 70s, dude.
Well, but no, this is by then, it's 1980.
Okay.
So yeah, late 70s, it's 1980. And so we got to get Chino up from the basement. He's all fucked up. And Norman walks me down the aisle. Chipito Areas from Santana, he's the best man. And he's crying at the altar. It was an insane fucking wedding.
Yeah.
And
was there anybody else of note there, like in the game besides Pablo?
There was a lot of people there.
Yeah.
Pablo was there, but I knew a lot of people by their first names, and who wants to know last names, and then the faces and the names would change, and so you know. But and then it was time, to go on the honeymoon, and by then Chino was back in the basement, so I went on the honeymoon by myself.
And back in the basement meant doing Freebase.
Yeah, and so I went on the honeymoon by myself.
Where'd you go?
Bahamas, Nassau, I remember Chino. I called him and he's like, well, I'll meet you. I'm like, dude, I'm 3 days into the honeymoon. Why come now?
Yeah.
And so it was a nice honeymoon. And I brought my friends with, they came
Sounds
with.
lovely.
Yeah. And then he was born a month later.
Uh-huh.
And
so how long did you stay married before you finally
when he's
got
born,
out?
My mother gets sick in New Orleans, terminal. I'm already at that point where my best friend, cocaine, is now turned on me. It's now my enemy.
Right.
The paranoia, not only because of the quantities, but because I'm surrounded by people that have no conception of the law. So I'm the only one listening. I'm the only one. I was never one that looking out the windows, but I would secure the perimeter. You know? And so it's getting bad.
What do you think could happen? Are you
The
thinking
same
about
thing I thought every day. They're coming.
Who's they?
Anybody. DEA, cops, they're coming.
rivals?
Just anybody. They're coming, and I'm sure most of it was in my head, but of course it was based in reality as well. But the cocaine has now taken over me. And I know that and I hate to say it, but my mother's illness was a godsend.
Yeah.
So I decide because I'd get so fucked up and I'm holding this newborn baby because if they come, they're going to have to tear him out of my arms. And it was ugly. I wouldn't even go to the bathroom anymore because they're not going to catch me on the toilet. I was fully dressed because that mugshot's going to look beautiful.
Yeah.
All my jewelry's on. I'm going to look fabulous. So my mother gets sick and I'm like, and remember I had left Loyola after 2 years. So I hadn't gotten my degree yet.
Can I stop you real quick? This is 1980, 81.
He's born in 80.
Now,
so 6 months after he's born, and I remember John Lennon gets shot, my mother gets sick.
And the revolution's already happened in Nicaragua.
The Somoza regime had fallen, but I'm not into politics at that point.
Right. But
I'm involved in another war. I'm in the drug war.
That's right.
See?
But very shortly after you leave Chino, you leave the life, you get out.
Well, I think I'm getting out. And my plan was just to go visit my mother. My initial plan wasn't to get out completely.
Right.
Because wait, I still want my blow.
Right.
I still want my money. And so I go to New Orleans. He's a newborn baby. I change his name on the spot. He's now got a new name. I'm now filing for divorce. I'm now changing this kid's name. I'm back at Loyola, finishing up my degree, taking care of my mother till she dies. But remember, when I left Chino, I left with $1 million and a suitcase full of blow. So when I moved back to my parents' house, trusty old mattress in my room where I grew up, everything's in there, and my mama knows. And at that point, my conservative mother, who's dying, becomes my biggest fucking ally. And, I told her, look, that's where the money's at. That's where I didn't tell her too much about the cocaine, but I was able to continue with my lifestyle in New Orleans, going back to Loyola, raising a kid.
You showed up at your parents' house
with a 6-month-old baby after years of being gone. My daddy goes, "Who's that?" I put him in my dad's arm. I said, "This is Patrick Vernon Hood." And so the next 2 years, I'm taking care of my mother till she dies. I'm getting my degree.
And you're still partying.
I'm still partying.
You're still partying.
Yeah, of course, because I still got the money under the mattress. I still got the blow. Chino is still sending me tons of money. He doesn't know I divorced him.
Right. Wow.
He doesn't know that I changed the kid's name.
Wow.
Because I'm thinking ahead.
And because he's so spun out too, but he's thinking that you're going to come back to him. Because that's what you told him.
That was my plan.
Yeah.
And now, again, I left everything.
At this time, I just want to point out for the historical record, you are, paranoid about the cops, about the law. That's why you fled. At this time, though, the Nicaraguans, Meneses and Blandon, and probably Chino, and that's what I'm going to bring this whole thing back to at the end, they are starting to work now with the CIA. They are now starting to be protected by the CIA because by 82, 83, they're already funneling money back to the Contras. And therefore they're probably, I'm assuming they're.
But there's a lull there. What happened was when I leave Chino and I go back to New Orleans, they're doing their thing. I decided I wasn't going back to Chino because he was just so reckless. And that was the reason I changed the kid's name, because I knew it was a matter of time that he was going to get popped. What I didn't know is he had an alias and documentation. He had a passport, another name, everything. And, he was this kind of guy. He was in the position where he had mules, safe houses, but still he wanted to be in the car with the mules, getting drunk, doing the blow. And he got popped.
What? Okay.
But under this fake name in Texas.
Wow.
So he proceeds to spend a couple of years with this fake name.
Okay. In
prison.
Okay. Wow. No way. So they never found out his real name.
They did not know, even though he's wanted under his real name. Because he's wanted in New Orleans. Okay.
So whatever happened to Chino? What became of him after you eventually go to Nicaragua?
He does his time, and then my mother dies, and I decide, well, you know what? Nothing's keeping me here in New Orleans. I already got my degree. Let me go check out this revolution.
Yes, because
let's go see what it's all about.
Because now it's international news. The Sandinistas have won.
Yeah, they won, and here you got a revolution that sounds pretty cool in your own backyard. Let's go check it out. I potty train him in 24 hours because I know I can't. There's nothing in the war. There's no Pampers. There's no potty train him, pack my bags. I told my daddy, what I'd been doing was I'd been going while my mother was sick. I'd been going back and forth to Nicaragua, bringing back merchandise. I hate to say it now, but alligator purses and wallets. So I go, have a great time for a month, spend absolutely nothing on these products, bring them back to the U.S., sell them at a huge markup.
Yeah.
And then when my mother died, I said, I'll go check out the revolution. So we did. So I'm there for 3 months. Chino's not in Nicaragua yet. He's probably out of prison by that point. I'm still in touch with him sporadically. So I'm in Nicaragua 3 months, and the revolution's cool, but it's hot. It's scarcity of shit. Electricity's going out, which wasn't unusual for a third world country. So I said, let me throw myself a going away party. So I throw this huge party, and we've got oligarchs, we've got poor people, white, gay, straight, rich, poor, and of course journalists were already in Nicaragua. So they're there.
Is this at the Intercontinental?
No, this is at a friend's house,
Okay.
Huge mansion, Callejita's house. And so I throw this big party, and I get approached by this lady that worked for NBC. She was a big-time NBC producer. She says, we had already met. She says, I've heard so much about you. You're very well known, and I like your style. I like that you could, move in both worlds, Nicaragua, U.S. You understand the cultures. Would you be interested in working for me, being a fixer and a translator for NBC? And I'm like, it sounds pretty interesting. And at the same party, there's a CBS guy there, Larry Doyle, and he comes up to me and he makes me the same offer. But we're doing blow together. I liked his offer better.
Yeah.
And so he says the same thing the NBC lady says. I like your style. The guy we got running the show here, we don't like him. He doesn't like to get his hands dirty. He doesn't like to be he's not a grunt. He thinks he's better than everybody else. He was a rich kid.
Yeah.
You'll hear about him in the podcast. And he says, are you interested? And I'm like, sure. He says, it pays very well. I said, well, it's not the money so much as it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Sure, let's do it.
And everybody in the journalism world back then partied.
Look, war correspondents operated in a world where you worked hard, but you partied harder because you didn't know if the next day's story was going to kill you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying every war or foreign correspondent did that, but a lot did, a lot to excess, especially the ones that were exposed to the horrors of war and PTSD, which I will learn and you'll hear about firsthand happened to me. So I jumped in from one war to another. And so Larry says, come to the Intercontinental Hotel tomorrow. You've got an interview and we'll see what happens. So I show up. I've got an interview with the lady that hired me, Carla Farrell. And she says to me, how do you feel about roadblocks? Like any good New Orleans girl, I can get in and out of anything. And she says, what do you think is your best quality? Thought about it for a second. I said, adaptability. She says, what do you mean by that? I said, I could sleep at the Plaza Hotel in New York, which is where I lived when I was a model. Like I could sleep in a shanty on top of coffee beans in the middle of nowhere. She says, you got the job. And by then she knew I spoke English and Spanish perfectly. I was half and half. I knew both cultures well. She says, come tomorrow, you're going up north. I thought I was going to Miami. Showed up in heels, pearls. She says, she looks at me the next day. She says, where do you think you're going? I said, you said north. I'm going to Miami. She says, no, you're going to the jungle today.
That's where the conflict is.
And, she knew I didn't have any journalistic experience, But to this day, all my friends and colleagues in the journalism world still think I went and studied journalism at Loyola, even though I always said I didn't.
Yeah.
I just fell into it.
Yeah.
So she sends me out my first day with a camera crew up north. I had to go change quickly. And that's, as they say, the rest is history.
And so you spent the next decade plus as a war correspondent.
Correct. Well, I started off as a fixer translator, working with this asshole, well, rest in peace, the guy that was running CBS in Nicaragua. Larry Doyle quickly wanted to get him out. He knew I was a guy's girl, you know, hold my own. You know, I could do anything as well as or better than any man. I was always out to prove something. And he quickly got that guy out and had me running the bureau. And within less than a year, I was producing and working with the big shots. And
getting your stories on 60 Minutes. I mean, you were in the thick of it.
Producer, local producer to executive producer to, you know, all the titles that come with all the different things.
I think Mike Wallace gave you a shout out you know.
Well, we were close friends.
Yeah.
I was very close with Mike, the creator of 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt, Ed Bradley, Morley Safer, because the big guys knew, just like the regular guys in news knew that Cookie will get you the story.
Yeah.
And or die trying.
And you almost died a few times.
Well, yeah, just like any good war correspondent, you know, you're in war.
Yeah. Which, and you know, go listen to the podcast, go to listen to Journalista, and you get into details about these, you know, insane stories.
Not only insane stories, not only, like you just said, stories that could have gotten me killed at any given time, but stories that made a difference. Not only made a difference in people's lives, people that were being affected directly by the war, but outsiders, the audience that was learning. War's not pretty.
Yeah.
War is fucked up. The people that keep getting fucked over are the poor, the nameless people, the grunts that are in the front lines. And
but of course, what makes this conflict so historical is not the conflict itself, but it was eventually what came out about it. And that is, of course...
Well, then you went from the revolution to then a civil war.
Right.
Now you're into a second war. I'm witnessing and I'm involved in a second war.
Right, but I'm referring to what comes out about it. I'm talking about Iran-Contra
and all of that.
So tell us about what breaks that story and your involvement in it.
Oh, you want to know how it broke?
Of course.
Okay.
This is your piece of history.
So I'm going to tell you all the different angles. Steve, my producer, Sean Donnelly here, my other producer. Steve is a genius, and I've told this to you, getting all these stories together, getting them put together cohesively. There's so much to this, and I will be the first to say it. I wasn't the only person that blew the whistle on Iran-Contra. There was a lot of moving pieces. You had print journalists, you had photographers, you had TV journalists, you had researchers, you had all different people coming from all different angles. You had people in Washington, and the whole Iran-Contra thing, I was inadvertently a part of it. I did not know it at the time. So it starts off, 7 American hostages are being held by Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right.
Reagan wants them out at any cost. The NSA guy, McFarland, comes up with a plan. You know what? Why don't we sell arms to Iran, even though there's an embargo on them for the original hostage crisis? They just want arms to fight Iraq.
Right.
Nobody has to know. This will be a one-time deal. We'll sell them the arms. We'll use that money to free the hostages. The hostages.
Wow.
Reagan says...
Could they not get money just from Congress for that?
No. Because we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right. Okay.
So
What was the money? What do they need to raise? Do you remember?
So what was raised, and I'm sure the numbers were not complete because, you had to make it look less. What is raised by that angle of Iran-Contra, the weapons sale, was supposedly $30 million. But by now, the whistle's being blown that we're selling arms to our mortal enemy. Again, let's fix a problem, but cause a bigger problem. So Attorney General Meese finds out that 30 million was made, but 18 million is unaccounted for. And you'll learn about another figure, a comedian friend that was with me down in Nicaragua. We came up with a joke once. How do you know you bought Contra cocaine? Half of it's there and the other half's unaccounted for. So 18 million's unaccounted for because the government, our government, had taken that 18 million to funnel to the Contras. But now the whistle's been blown about the weapons sale. So now they got to come up.
What's the connection though? I don't get it. Like I still don't understand that. What is the connection between selling arms to Iran
Because it was done secretly.
and the cocaine?
No, the cocaine's later. This is where I'm coming to. That was the beginning of Iran-Contra.
Right.
But since they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, our government has to come up with another way to make money for the Contras.
Right.
That's where the drugs come in. This is separate from selling weapons to Iran because now we're caught. Reagan's caught. Oliver North takes the fall. So now the new method to come up with money is the same guy from the CIA that had been involved with the Iran weapons sale, Casey.
William Casey.
Bill Casey comes up with a plan. Let's make deals with these cocaine dealers, let's give them free reign to continue their business. Scot-free, we're not going to touch them. They can continue to bring their merchandise into the U.S., but they have to help us with the money for the Contras, which was kind of easy because by then now the money is just crazy.
Billions and billions a year.
And my friends who were the dealers and the movers and shakers already had Contra sympathies.
Right.
So they liked the idea, okay, we could stay in business. We still can keep our money. We just have to funnel some of the money to a cause that we like.
Right.
And now the U.S. now has a new method of secret money to the Contras.
Right. Now, did you have any idea in the 80s that was actually going on with your friends? Nobody knew.
I knew that they were still in business, but I didn't know that they were, which is, okay, when I get hired by CBS, I tell them, look, I'll cover any story you want except drug stories. And do you know that only one CBS bigwig asked me why? The rest of them were like, okay, we respect you. And the one that said why, and I just said, because I have a shady past and I know all the players. But I didn't know that they were involved in a coke for money for
and
Contra
guns.
scheme.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So I'm now inadvertently connected to this, not knowing. So I jumped from one, fire to another.
That, do you remember the photo? It's famous now. It's DEA photos of Pablo Escobar himself after he's already become internationally known on a airstrip in Nicaragua, helping to unload a plane.
I don't think I ever saw the photo.
Filled with cocaine.
I don't, you got to understand, I'm in Nicaragua.
They zoom in on the photo and it's a CIA plane.
Yeah, Air America.
That's right.
But you got to remember, by then, I'm in a war-torn country. There's no cable TV.
Cookie,
there's no internet.
Into the mic, please. Thank you.
There's no internet. There's no cable TV. So I don't really know a lot of what's going on outside. Just what's going on in Nicaragua or other Latin American countries.
Now, when does this scandal about the money with the plane getting shot down, and tell us about that?
You mean Hazen Foos?
Is that where they find the receipt for the Swiss bank account?
Well, what happens is I'm on vacation in Miami with my son Chicho, and I hear that you got to remember for 10 plus years, all the journalists in Latin America, especially the ones in Nicaragua, we all knew what was going on, but it could never be proven. The Sandinistas kept saying, look, the U.S. is trying to overthrow a government illegally.
Right.
But we can't prove it either.
Because remember, for those that don't know, the U.S. is not supposed to be involved in this conflict. Congress refuses to give money to the military so they can fund the Contra rebels. They don't want any part of it. And this is why the executives, right, Reagan and his cohorts have to go around Congress and make money illegally by working to fund the Contras.
By then, we all know now, Reagan's got Alzheimer's. He's not even running
Reagan's
the show.
not even involved in it, right?
Who's his VP? The ex-head of the CIA, George
Bush, baby.
And not only ex-head of the CIA, as much as I never liked his politics, he was brilliant. He knew
absolutely
what he was doing.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm in Miami, and I get word that a plane has been shot down with Americans in it. Everyone's killed but one schmuck who happened to be the only person wearing a parachute.
Mm-hmm.
And he's caught. Now, he is convinced, this poor slob is convinced he's going to be killed.
Yeah.
He's going to be shot.
Mm-hmm.
And he only survives because he's wearing a parachute. The pilot is killed, another guy. And this guy, Hazefus, he was just a CIA kicker. He would be on planes kicking supplies, pamphlets, propaganda.
Yeah.
So he's taken, there's a famous photo the friend of mine took that and he was shot down by a lowly Sandinista, not with a surface-to-air missile or anything, just,
a machine
bullets.
gun.
Yeah. Plane comes down. So I said, man, I knew, and those of us journalists in Nicaragua, we knew we had the story of the century. Mm-hmm. This was the story of the century. Now we can prove, but let's see what happens. Or the Sandinista is going to kill this guy. What is going to happen? So I come up with the bright idea in Miami. I called Mike. First I called Don Hewitt. Then I called Mike. I said, look, why don't I try to get this guy to confess this weekend on 60 Minutes, Sunday night, confess his sins. You were
going to interview him while he was a captive of the Sandinistas?
He'd just been caught.
Right. He was a prisoner.
He's a prisoner, but it happened on maybe a Thursday or a Friday. I come up with the bright idea. Let's go down to Nicaragua. I know I can get this interview. I hadn't gotten it yet. I know I could make this happen. Let's all fly down, get this guy to confess on Sunday night, Saturday when we film, but it'll be aired Sunday. And he's going on trial Monday morning.
Wow. Huge
So Don
story.
loves the idea. Mike Wallace is all over it. I'm calling Nicaragua. I'm calling Ortega's right-hand guy, the PR guy, and I'm like, look, you and I both know y'all going to put him on trial. It's going to be a sham trial. You and I both know you're not going to kill him because this is your best evidence of wrongdoing by the U.S.
Yeah.
You just want to put it out there. Why don't you let me and myself in 60 Minutes, interview him, let him confess Sunday night, and then you go ahead and put him on trial Monday morning. They loved the fucking idea.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike and Don, a couple of New York producers, get the Learjet, pick me up in Miami. Of course, I saw Chino the night before. Give me my blow. I'm going back to Nicaragua. I leave him with his dad in Miami, and we fly into Nicaragua to do the interview. And it's a whole moving parts to the story. You got to listen to the podcast. But suffice to say that we do fly in. We do the interview. He confesses everything on the 60 Minutes piece.
And it aired.
It airs that Sunday. I fly back out with the big guys.
Hold on. What did he say?
He said that he was a grunt. He worked for the government. He was a kicker. Did
he say anything about drugs and cash?
No.
Or just that?
We got to remember, he was a nobody.
Right.
He's a kicker.
Yeah.
And he's only alive because he wore a fucking parachute.
But he admitted he was part of this. He was a member of the CIA.
He knew that he said that he worked for the government, Air America, this and that. So he tells everything Sunday night. I fly back to New York, but the Sandinista, no, but we need something else for the story. So Mike says to me, can we get somebody else to talk for this piece? I said, well, what about Ortega? What if we get Ortega? And so I called the guy. I said, can we get Ortega? He says, yeah, we'll give you Ortega, who's the president. So we're doing that interview after Hazardfuss, same day. And I said to myself, let's get Mike to ask this Ortega, is it possible that Hazardfuss could be home for Christmas? Mike does not like that question.
Why not?
No, that's stupid. Don Hewitt loves it. Mike asked the damn fucking question because depending on what Ortega says, we'll know what's the future. So Mike says to Daniel Ortega, is it possible, Mr. President, that Hazardfuss could be home for Christmas? We know he's going on trial tomorrow. Hazardfuss, everyone knows he's going to be found guilty. Is he going to be put to death? Is he going to be in prison forever?
Would they do that with the Sandinista? Was it possible?
Listen what Ortega answers. He says, anything's possible. We knew it.
Yeah.
We knew this guy was going to be put on trial. It was going to be a sham trial. He's going to be found guilty. And he is guilty of what he did, but he's going home.
Wow.
Because all the Sandinistas needed was to prove to the world
that the Americans...
we've been telling you all along the U.S. is involved in this shit.
Okay.
And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. So
it
you
was
guys
the biggest story of the year.
So
now
you
we'll
got
get to the...
So you got the story and you got Hazardfuss free.
Well, no, now you want to know about Iran-Contra.
Yes.
So before, I go to New York, I come back, I've got to do my job, the trial. There's a lot of moving pieces you'll hear in the podcast. The Sandinistas give me access to everything that was on that plane. Access that no other journalist had. So I go in and I'm looking at,
Pardon me, did they leave the plane where it was or did they drag it to a base?
They brought the plane in. They got all the evidence from the plane. Yeah. So I'm looking through all the evidence, and it's a lot of little things, a lot of big things. And I come across a business card for a vice president of a Swiss bank account. And on the back is a series of numbers. And the Sandinistas had listed the evidence as a business card with a phone number on the back. It's too long.
That ain't no phone number.
There's no fucking phone number. I knew it was a Swiss bank account. So I'm saying to myself, this was on the pilot.
Yeah.
The pilot is also not anybody big shot. What's a pilot?
Yeah.
Who's throwing supplies and propaganda off a plane doing with a Swiss bank account number? So I took the card and I went back to the office and I called New York. I called DC. I said, look, something funny's going on here. What do you mean? And I told him, I said, there's this Swiss banker, banker. But before I called Washington and New York, I called the bank. I called that vice president.
How did it? Was
the
name of the bank? It had
his name and phone number.
Did they have the name of the bank?
Yeah, but I don't remember that. So I called this guy. I said, look, I know you can't give out, information, but is it okay if I read you a series of numbers and all I want you to tell me is it possible this could be an account number? So I read out the series of numbers. He says yes and hangs up the phone. I knew it. That's when I called New York, Washington, Miami. Something funny's going on. I've got this Swiss bank VP manager. I've got a card. I've got what could be an account number. What is this pilot doing with a Swiss bank account number? And that was my contribution to the dominoes falling.
Wow.
Then there were other people involved. I'm not taking all the credit.
Right.
I was just a small piece of the puzzle, but a very important piece.
Wow. So did they give that over to other authorities?
I took the card.
Yeah, but did you give the bank account number over to other authorities?
I gave the information to CBS.
Right.
I didn't give it to authorities. I gave it to CBS. Let them run with it.
So what was discovered later?
Well, what was discovered was here's a nobody guy. What's he doing with a Swiss bank account? What's in that Swiss bank account? And of course, to this day, we don't know if it was the money from the arms. Was it from the first part of the puzzle? Was it the money from the drugs? Was it both?
How much money was in there?
We don't know.
So they never got in there. We never found that out.
How could you find out? No reputable Swiss bank is going to give out the account.
I thought authorities would get a warrant or something like that.
Can't do that. I don't think that was allowed. I don't think that it was ever.
And also the U.S. is not supposed to be involved, so they don't want to go, get an international warrant.
We knew it was CIA adjacent.
Yeah. Damn, so it breaks the story, but it
starts
doesn't.
the domino effect.
Right.
So by then, all these other journalists all over the world, they're all involved. Everybody knows it's the story of the decade. Gotcha.
What do you think it was?
Well, I knew.
Why was it on the pilot? What is your whole theory around that?
Because that was his job, I guess. He was the one.
Was to fly the money over?
Who knows? But he had that bank account number.
What do you think it is, though?
Well, what I think it is he was just another employee.
But how do you think the Swiss bank account related to Contra rebels and
somebody
the CIA?
Had to have.
So it was it was a holding account.
Yes, somebody had to have access to that money.
Mm-hmm.
So the access isn't going to be the CIA guy.
Right.
It's not going to be Bill Casey. It's not going to be the NSA guy. It's going to be somebody whose name we don't know.
Totally. Makes sense. So
who can get the money in and out.
Right.
But we never found out, at least I never found out the details.
Yeah.
And then isn't it funny that my friends were involved
That's right.
in the money scheme to help the Contras.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
right.
here I am,
now,
Coke adjacent.
Yeah. So here you are breaking a story about the same people who are
that I'm indirectly involved
helping your friends, Nicaraguan drug traffickers.
Who are my friends?
Yes. Sell
and
drugs.
I'm involved.
Yeah. So you're at the apex of all of this.
And I'm involved. Thank God for me telling CBS I'm not covering.
Did you feel like when this was happening, when this scandal was breaking, did you feel like you were in the middle of an international historical moment?
With the Hazardfuss thing, I knew that I had the story of the fucking decade. I knew that it was going to be the biggest story of my life. What I didn't know is that I was a part of that story personally through the drugs. When did that occur to you? Was that in the 90s when everything started to come out? Look, it occurred to me when, even after CBS had left, and I had certain friends in Nicaragua, Nordwing, and I was still getting my shit, I'd send my driver to the house, pick up an envelope. Don't touch the envelope. Don't shake the envelope. Just bring it back directly to me, and Nordwing's always been there. Nordwing is one of my closest friends you could say, how could you say that? How could this, type of person, that most people see a certain way, and probably rightly so. Well, I'll tell you why. He protected me. He may have influenced me, but everything that happened to me, I brought upon myself. But he protected me. And he protected me through all the errors of my life, whether I knew it or I didn't.
What ended up happening to him in the United States and to his cohorts?
Nothing happened to him. His downfall was when he went back to Nicaragua and he was still in the business, and some Sandinistas, and this is after all the wars are over, they just got tired that here he is, he's living here and he's helping our enemies. And so they threw him in jail in Nicaragua.
How much time did he do
and
down
Danilo
there?
as well. Maybe a couple of years.
Did you find it suspicious? Like, I know you didn't know about their involvement with the U.S. government, with the CIA at the time.
I knew something was up in that.
They never got caught. All these people, the biggest...
Maybe they got caught, but why was nothing ever happening?
Right.
And I had friends in New Orleans. Now, you got to remember, this business also went into my city. And I had friends in New Orleans, very prominent, wealthy, successful people also in the game who fell. Yeah. Or as we would say, they're on vacation.
And they went and did time.
They did time, but then their spouses were still allowed to run the business.
To operate, right. How is that? Yeah. Well, a lot of them too were probably DEA snitches and things like that. The DEA
but they were all employees of my husband and Norby.
Right.
Even the New Orleans people.
See, but the DEA was trying to come after guys like your husband and like Norwin. The CIA was thwarting the DEA. The same government was working against people in their own government.
Exactly.
That's what's so chilling, And the CIA, and they've got their hands all over that era. They were involved.
The DEA's hands were tied.
That's right. And
they tried going after my guys for forever.
And to this day, they never got them. Now.
And Chino never got popped under his real name.
Yeah.
Never, just those couple of years under an alias.
Right. So they must have had a big time involvement in funneling money to the Contras because they were that valuable that they couldn't go to prison. Now, what about Freeway Rick Ross? Freeway Rick was the guy receiving the coke from Nicaraguan traffickers like
Correct. That's
Norwin.
where Danilo came in. See, Danilo came into the game late.
Danilo Blandon.
Yes, he needed money. I forget what happened. He lost his business. He was one of those people that left Nicaragua with Somoza fell thinking that they're going to lose their...
Yeah.
They shouldn't have left.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have left, you would have kept everything. And you could have worked under that regime. Well, he lost everything. He needed money. So he got set up in Miami, had to rent a car or a used car lot. All I know is when I was working for CBS, and I would take R&R, my vacations wouldn't be, a week or two, it'd be a month, 2 months. I'd fly into Miami, I'd go into Danilo at the airport, at the rent-a-car business, saying 3 things. Where's Chino? Where my money at? Give me my blow.
¿Dónde está Chino?
¿Dónde está Chino? Dame mi lana. ¿Dónde está la mercancía?
Yeah. That's how you referred to coke, as la mercancía, the merchandise.
Just party favors.
Yeah.
We always called it different names. But it was basically, where's Chino? Where my money at? Give me my blow. And so Danilo, we got to keep Cookie quiet because if she gets angry and loud, she's going to draw attention because I don't know what they're doing. I'm thinking it's just business. I don't know that it's this international drug.
Political scandal.
Exactly.
Now, is your habit pretty out of control by this time?
I was always, in excess of everything. I was.
Did you ever get into crack?
No, I might have smoked freebase a couple of times. Never really got into it. I might have tried crack a couple of times. Like any good drug addict, I tried, a lot of things.
Now, did you ever meet Freeway Rick when he was dealing with?
Yeah,
Norwin?
Because Danilo would fly out to LA, and so when I would come in on these R&Rs, if I wanted to hook up with Chino, and by hook up I don't mean relationships. I mean
partying.
Where's my shit?
Yeah.
Give me my shit. So I'd meet him in different places. Yeah. So I would meet him sometimes in LA.
Right.
And then Danilo was there also a very good friend of the family's.
Mm-hmm.
Chino would be there. And then, of course, the round table, the Coke wrap, up all night.
And then this black guy would show up.
Yeah, but he was just a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he was an employee. Look, a lot of these friends were employees, and I knew that. And I always treated employees with respect.
Well, to be fair, Rick Ross was hardly an employee. He was the first one that had
But he was
the
an
crack.
employee of that Norbing and Danilo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
Allow it. And he was just a friend. He was, again, of course I knew he was some sort of gangster. But my whole life I hung out with gangsters one way or another, whether they were from Nicaragua, whether they were from dictatorships. I always hung out with gangsters. Always.
Yeah.
That's who I felt comfortable around.
So did you see,
I didn't see business and,
you didn't see any business?
And turning powder into rock. And no, because even if we were doing rock, it was freebase. It wasn't the crack.
Right.
Remember, the
Right.
rich man's crack.
Mm-hmm. But at this time, Rick Ross was taking the rich man's
he was
crack
100
and turning it into the poor man's drug.
100%.
Yeah.
And in fact,
$1 million a day
I'm
selling
going to
crack.
say something that I've never said before, but I had come up with this idea before the CBS and all that. When you got the coca plant, then you turn it into paste, then you turn that into rock, and then you turn that into powder.
Powder and into
So,
rock.
and then it comes into the States. I always would say, why don't you just skip that last step and bring the rock into the country? This is before
What
I
do you
knew.
mean the rock into the country?
Okay.
Like
So
turn
you
it
got-
into crack?
Well, no, this is before crack, but you got the plant. You turn that in Colombia to the paste. You turn the paste into rock.
What's rock? Oh,
Base.
When the base dries, it
Dries,
rocks
it's base. Then you take that to the kitchen and make it powder
Oh,
in
right.
Colombia. So I would always say,
Yeah.
why go that extra step? Why not bring that base rock? But it's so weird how I
Yeah.
would come up with this shit.
Oh, that's interesting.
I would
yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
So initially I thought that these guys were bringing in crack or rock,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It was bringing powder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you still had to fulfill the orders for powder.
Yeah, of course.
Because
of
the
course.
crack was just for the ghetto and the poor people.
Right, of
And
course.
the people of color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
if we were going to smoke, it was going to be freebase. It
Yeah.
wasn't going to be crack.
Right. And there's not much difference. We know now. They
know now,
they
but
painted
it's-
crack as like this devil drug, but it was like it's
Yeah,
like
but even-
75% Coke with a little
Yeah,
bit of baking soda
Yeah,
hardened up.
yeah. Well, but at the end, it was a lot of chemicals and bullshit. But yeah, I tried it. I tried a lot of things. But Ricky was just a friend.
Yeah.
And I knew he was working with my people,
Mhm. Yeah.
but he was just a friend.
Yeah.
And I was never scared or intimidated by people.
Did you know how big of a mover he was at the
No.
time? Because you didn't
But I
ask
knew
questions
that
like
my people, the people that I was related to or that I were my friends, I knew that it was a big operation. I knew these weren't Penny Annie,
Yeah, of course.
you know, Graham,
Mm-hmm.
you know, baggies, you know, I knew that because even when I was married to Chino, you know, the kilos were 50, 60 grand
Yeah.
a kilo. You know, that's, I laugh. I say, that's how I know the metric system is because of drugs.
Yeah.
I didn't learn the metric system in school.
That's how most Americans know the metric system.
well, drug
kilos.
people.
Yeah.
Well, drug people,
Yeah.
not the regular Americans, just drug people.
Well, I just mean now because it's,
Oh.
you know, drugs are on every show. Narcos is the biggest thing since,
Yeah,
you know.
but the regular American doesn't know how many pounds are in a
No,
kilo.
of course
yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. But you and I do.
I guess we do.
But we do. Yeah.
So now, you know, now we're rounding into the 90s. What year did we give up the war? What year did the CIA and Americans, the people that wanted to see the communists fall, what year did we realize, oh, we've lost? The Contras have been defeated.
In 92, you have the elections, the free elections. I always refer to that election as a government that came into power through revolution, yet lost power through an election. That never happened.
So that happened in 92.
Well, what happens is whoever's got the guns runs the show. So if you lose,
they
the
lost
Sandinistas
the
throw
election.
an election,
Yeah.
thinking they're going to win, and the people were still with them, and they would have won, except for the fact that the populace was tired of war.
Yeah.
They were just tired.
Yeah.
So even though they said they were for the Sandinistas and were, they voted for my Aunt Violeta, who won. She became the president.
Your aunt.
My aunt, through marriage, through my daughter's father, also one of my husbands.
Yeah.
She was his aunt. So she was my aunt.
Oh my God.
And my whole life I always called her Aunt Tia, aunt.
Wow. And she became the president. And what party? Was it like the Independent Party?
Just the party that ran against the Sandinistas.
Okay, but these are not Contra people.
Oh, no.
These are not radicals.
That war's over. Nicaragua's beat the U.S.
Wow.
And so they decide they're going to hold free elections, which they do. And then my good friend, Mr. Jimmy, would come in, Jimmy Carter, Miss Roslyn, they'd come in for, elections. And they lived on the same floor that I lived and worked in. And Chicho could tell you that story about him with this Secret Service. And
so after the election, what?
Then things started. There was no more war.
Yeah.
Now there's a government. Now the Sandinistas were the losers, but they're still, running things.
And now Nicaragua is no longer a big story.
Nobody cares.
Nobody
the
cares.
U.S. is tired. There's no more war.
Yep.
War's good for business.
Of course it is.
But once that's over,
There's no
and
more
then I
clickbait.
continued to stay in Nicaragua for CBS for a few more years, but with no standing crew.
Yeah.
Our offices were then,
Dissolved.
not dissolved, but downgraded, and then we couldn't give stories away.
Yeah.
And so then, and
Did you not consider trying to go somewhere else to cover stories
because
anywhere
by
else?
then my PTSD had set in full force. All those years that I've been thrown to the wolves covering all these stories, and now you don't want the stories. Now I'm not going to have a job. Not that I wanted to continue doing it, but it's over.
Yeah.
It had run its course. I'm now with a new husband, and
What number husband?
3 maybe, and then I'm still partying, and it was over. My life, my career, everything was over.
Yeah. It's like show business. Like you get
It's
a moment.
over,
You
and
get a
then-
moment where it's hot,
And I got the
then nobody
PTSD,
cares.
and nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I'm being abandoned
Yeah.
by the network, by everything. And what was left? Go back to the U.S.
That's right. So you went back to the U.S. and then
I think I went first to Miami because that husband was beating the fuck out of me because, of course, Cookie's downfall was epic. It was dark. Went back to Miami, lived in D.C. for a while, ran a Blockbuster Video.
No way. You were working at a Blockbuster Video.
I was a manager, man. And
You went from rich oligarch
because I didn't want
cocaine
anybody to
wife
know who I was.
to running a Blockbuster Video.
I didn't want anybody to know who I was. I did that for a while. Then I came back to New Orleans.
But at what time what year did you essentially drop off the map when the commission happened? Just tell us about
after
that
I did
and
the
we'll wrap.
Washington and Blockbuster Video, then I went back to New Orleans and was selling shoes, designer shoes at a department store. And, now all these people that knew me from that era, they're like, man, so you were telling the truth about some of those stories you were telling us in the stock room or the, on the floor of selling shoes.
Yeah.
You really were that person. Or my favorite reaction now is, we had no idea who you fucking were. Because I never came across like, oh, I was this, I was that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so I learned that there was a commission being set up in Washington in Congress, one of the many investigations. And this one was going to be about CIA involvement with introducing crack cocaine into the U.S.
And this is on the heels of the Gary Webb story. Correct. He was the journalist for the San Jose Mercury who originally broke this. And that's how the world came to know about Danilo and Norwin Meneses and then Rick Ross, who's now at this point serving a life sentence. You know, he got set up and, you know, he had no idea that he was working for the CIA.
And now he's fighting the rapper Rick Ross because he wants his name back.
Exactly.
But Ricky was a cool guy. I mean, I liked him. Mm-hmm. But you gotta know, I liked bad people and I liked hanging out.
He wasn't even a bad person. He was just a businessman.
And he was a smart guy.
Yeah.
Smart as fuck, dude.
Yeah. He would he
would speak one way
Yeah.
with certain people. He'd speak another way with other people.
So when all this came down, where were you?
When I'm in New Orleans and I hear about this commission and somebody gets word to me that they want me to go talk and testify.
Who's they? Congress?
Congress. I don't know which side is wanting me. Mm-hmm. And they want me to go testify about what I know about crack cocaine. And I'm like, fuck no. I'm not testifying. I'm not getting my name or any words on record to Congress or anybody, because who knows what the fuck they're going to find out about me or what the fuck they already know about my past. No. So I just kind of faded into the background. And
were you worried about reprisals at all?
The only people I was ever scared of something happening to me was when I would come to the U.S. while working for CBS and that maybe the CIA or somebody would have me killed. Because at some point, myself, CBS, and other CBS colleagues were on Reagan and Bush's shit list.
Yeah.
They tried to discredit us. They put us on blacklist. You know, stories were written in right-wing publications. CBS always came to, my defense because they knew that maybe some of this shit could be true, but I was always coming through with stories and getting the job done.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that on the bonus episode. So if you click over, we're going to go over to Patreon now and just talk for a little bit about the Bush-Reagan shit list that you were on and just a little bit more about the evidence that we have of CIA involvement with the drug traffickers. But the story is really about you, Cookie. Like, that's what I want people to, like, you have such a fascinating, amazing part to play in this.
And the fact that I survived it all.
And this Cold War epic, which, really defined the 20th century in America. You were involved with a war that ultimately the U.S. lost. Like you said,
you believe
Nicaragua
a little bitty
beat
country
the United States. Yeah.
They beat them.
They lost Vietnam, and then they went and picked on another small, and helpless country, and they won.
You'll hear a great story in the podcast about how I almost saved the world from World War III.
Oh, I haven't heard that episode yet.
No, it's coming up. Yeah. You're going to love that story. I didn't get the story because it was so hush-hush, but you'll love it.
Okay, great.
And before we continue, can I just give a shout out?
Of course.
To Steve Esteb, the genius, the creator behind all of this, the voice of the show, my friend here, producer, very close friend, Sean Donnelly, who has talked me off the ledge many times because you can tell I'm very animated. I overthink a lot of shit. And he keeps me even keeled. And I just got to give a shout out to those two amazing men in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's excellent. And by the way, what made you want to talk after all these years?
Steve. Although for about 30 plus years, I've always had this story in the back of my mind. It was going to be, first it was going to be a book, then it was going to be a movie. The title went from Well-Informed Sources to Journalista and then I was introduced to Steve 13 years ago by a cousin. And he had heard the story from her. He didn't believe my story. He then met with me, heard it from the horse's mouth, didn't believe it again. And then at the end of that meeting, he said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't believe this. That sounds like bullshit to me. I said, okay, let's meet here, same restaurant, tomorrow at noon. And we met, and I brought what's now referred to as the infamous The Box. And in that box, I kept everything.
Oh my God.
Press passes, newspaper articles, books that I'm in, stories that I covered, tapes, cassettes. I had it all.
Wow.
I brought all the fucking receipts. And he wanted to go through it at that moment. I said, nope, take it home. We'll talk when you're done. 3 days later, he stayed up for 3 days going through everything. He says, I want in. Do you want to talk? And I wasn't sure, you know. It's one thing writing a book. It's another thing making a movie, but it's a podcast. Now I'm going to
your
talk.
soul. Yeah.
And everything that I'd kept buried and hidden for 30 plus years. What, now I'm going to talk about it? And then all these people in my lives, all my different lives that just know certain parts of me, now everybody's going to know everything. And then people like my producers and friends, they're going to walk away from this. But I'm the one that is putting myself out there. Right now, I got the Society of Nicaragua all on pins and needles because they all think I'm going to drop names and tell dirty little secrets.
What about
Well,
Norman?
I tell them this isn't Peyton Place. It's not that kind of podcast. I'm not naming names. I'm not telling your dirty little secrets that you went to bed with, this general to keep your business or, you had affairs, you did blow. It's not that kind of podcast.
No, you're not snitching.
But I got a whole country right now on pins and needles worried about that.
What about Norman? What does he think? Norman Meneses.
Norman's never been worried about me, and he never will be.
Yeah. Wow.
He's got nothing to worry about.
Man, he dodged what most traffickers.
He trained me. He trained me.
He's got the playbook on drug dealing.
He's got the playbook
work with the government
on just being good at what you do. And he was very good.
The playbook is work with the government. That's the only way you eventually emerge from this and be useful to them.
Yes.
That's the cold, hard truth.
And he also eventually knew when to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so go listen to the Journalista, you guys. It's up right now on Spotify. I think they're 5 episodes through. It's a 9-episode
Today,
podcast.
The 5th episode dropped. It's 9 episodes.
Yeah.
We are on, as you just said, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, you name it, we're everywhere.
I say it's like listening to a TV show. It
really is.
It's like listening to a Netflix show.
Because you actually feel like you're there. Like sometimes I listen to my own show. I lived it. I was there. And it affects me viscerally all over again as if I'm there on the spot.
Yeah. No, it's
incredible.
It's
incredible.
Amazing. It's amazing.
Each episode gets better than the last. Some are harder for me to tell than others, but boy, get ready for the bumpiest motherfucking ride that you're ever going to fucking listen to. It's a story.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's as good as Narcos. It's as good as anything you're going to watch on TV. And Cookie, you're amazing. There's nobody better to tell the story.
Johnny.
So switch over right now. We're going to get a little bit more with Cookie. Patreon.com/The Connect Show. We're also going to have Cookie's son on to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up.
Being son of Cookie.
Surrounded by, being son of Cookie.
Son of Cookie.
Thank you so much for coming out here.
Johnny, you know what? It's been awesome.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's been awesome.
Enjoy your rest of your stay in LA, okay?
Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care.